as we've got Leenock and Mista. Only in a best of three though, Lidakor. It feels crazy that there's only going to be 3 games between these two. These two that are considered on top of the game.
Indeed, right now it looks like we don't have names on the top of the screen, but you can see the scores on the right side. Mista is going to be playing in red, and Leenock is going to be our blue player out there. Looks like Leenock going very aggressive at that scout. You can see that he's marching straight towards the base of Mista over here, so obviously this map has quite a lot of sheep available, and especially if you are up against the HRE or you are playing the HRE, you want to make sure that you have the majority of those sheep for you.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm just chuckling at the fact that we have got HR in the game, so it seems fitting that we're getting announcements in German. So of course we'll see if we can tweak that in the future matches. But yeah, this is gonna be fun to watch because Mister's gone for the HRE and Leenock
Oh
it's
yeah,
kind of
yeah, I'm
interesting
just
the
now noticing.
prioritization. Yeah.
I'm just now noticing we have a German game over here. Now that's not something that I actually considered yesterday when we set up core for this one. So I guess we're just going to treat this as a German lesson, okay? And honestly, it's fitting. I mean, we have HRE here, so why would you call it mining camp when you can just call it Bergarbeiterlager?
Yeah, it makes me really happy when it's Witterstrafgegebad. Is that close? All right, let's focus on the game. We will let it take away. It's going to be fun, actually, because I think this is just the test that people have been looking for. Like, do casters know all the names and all the numbers off by heart?
And there we
Oh,
go.
numbers obviously going to be the same, but... Okay. Wait, has he fixed it?
Yeah, he
Okay,
fixed it.
okay. I appreciate you. There we go. We got it up top. There you go, folks. Finally, you've got the appropriate names, the appropriate places. So, as we were talking about, Mr. Go for the HRE. I got so sidestepped by that thought process. I didn't even get to my point, which is it's interesting that Leenock isn't playing the HRE because he's been practicing the crap out of this Civ. I've been seeing him specifically grinding that Civ on the ladders quite a lot. Interesting that he values the French, but we have seen that kind of disparity, right? The surprising shock after the first day of Frizzy Marsh's game is that the HRE were the best performing Civ in a situation where I would have expected it to be either the French or the Rus, because these Civs tend to be the more comfortable picks on new and unknown maps.
Yeah, indeed. As you pointed out, Rus is probably one of the most versatile civilizations out there. So, on maps that are somewhat more unknown, where the meta is not figured out, Rus is always a good wildcard. But on this map, oh, wait a second. Just catch everything here.
Nope.
We do have a Minewerk Palace coming in here for Mista. So, I guess we're gonna have to reassess how we approach this game over here, because I was just about to say that HRE, they like to play a little bit more campy over here, a little bit more defensive and focus on the sheep instead of moving out. But Mista has different plans, and honestly, he's only building it with one villager. That's what core is showing us. One villager means that you are focusing your eco, or like focusing your villagers on gathering resources rather than spending time building, and it's a very common way to go for fast castles, although he's moving towards stone. So this could be a 2TC build, or this could even be a fast castle with Burgrave here. And just imagine this, starting off the day with a Minewerk Burgrave combination.
I think we've seen one so far this tournament, but yeah, it is becoming a little bit more appreciated. There's certain players that will spit in the face of it still, namely a person became a B that didn't make it to day number 2. But some people really have started to engage the mine work. And of course, we have to remember that in the future, it's probably likely to get like juiced up a bit more, I'm expecting. Like, I wouldn't be surprised considering that there's still a lot of debate on whether it's valuable enough. The interesting thing is how it changes your early game build, though, because the reason why he's slow building this up compared to an Arca Chapel is that he needs that additional time because you're going to miss out, right? Like, if you rush an Arca Chapel up, everything suddenly gets blessed and it feels good. If you rush your mine work up, you just have a lot of additional idle eco that you've still got the issue of like limited prelates and thus limited holy inspiration.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there are pros and cons of going for Arcane Chapel. Some players hate it. Like, for example, Beastie once said that he would rather place an Arcane Chapel in the middle of an open field than to ever build the Minewerk Palace. So he's a big believer. While others are saying that, look, if I make 2 or 3 prelates, I can achieve a comparable level of eco efficiency, and I will need those prelates to gather relics anyways, so I might as well go for the Minewerk Palace. Personally, I prefer the Arcane Chapel, but I think it's gonna come down to what exactly Mista is planning with that Minewerk. He gathered a tiny bit of stone for himself, but not much, and you see he's banking up resources for what will probably be Castle Age.
Yeah, it makes sense in this matchup as well because you don't want to hang around in feudal at all. And realistically, like the HRE never want to hang around. Even when they go for double TC, what happens? They instantly go castle. They don't build up like a military force. They don't go free TC. It's always been castle imperial for the Civ. And it's for good reasons. Like they can achieve some of the greatest tech up timings possible due to how efficient the early game eco is. As the game goes on, other Civs start to rear their heads and show their economical exploitation, right? With things like TC booming, with the Song Dynasty for the Chinese, with increased production for the French, increased gathering rates. But there's the key detail, gathering rates. On the initial resources, nothing does compare to the HRE with the most holy 40% increased gathering speed on every villager that is blessed.
Yeah, that's exactly it out there. You've talked about this a lot yesterday, that the HR is probably the only civilization that can match the gather rate of the enemy shorefish while not leaving their base. It's not going to be exactly the same, especially because the official gather rate, which is like 1 food per second for the fisherman as compared to the sheep villagers being 0.75 per second, are not exactly representative because obviously you do have travel time, you do have some villagers bumping into each other, so realistic gather rates are lower. But still, if you look at the numbers, I actually did the math on this before stream. The HRE is the only civilization that can realistically accomplish this. Maybe you could make an argument for the Chinese with the extra food dropped off, but HRE is just a much more streamlined here.
It's tight, right? Because if you use the Chinese as a comparative, it's actually like with the supervising, it becomes a ball gather rate because you get the extra 20%, so you can like add that onto the 0.75. But when you're the HRE, yeah, if you're gathering on the sheep, 0.75 by default on sheep, but with a 40% increase, that puts you above the shoreline fish at 1.05. It's actually crazy how powerful the HRE can be without coming out their own base. And I think that was an important decision when we want Frisian in. Like this balance of like with the reserve resources you can have, allowing people that want to play condensed to play condensed, but saying, hey, there is a point where you have to come out. You are encouraged to come out. There are reasons to come out. And I think one detail we're maybe going to have to look into is the sheep. I've noticed the feedback from a lot of players is there is a hell of a lot of sheep. And that might be a contributing factor to why we're seeing the HRE with such dominant stats.
Indeed. And as you see, the Burgrave Palace is the landmark of choice over here for Mista. When you go for the mine work, you want to combine it with the Burgrave. And if you can sustain a good, consistent flow of resources, this is a deadly combination. Like, you can get your Castle Age Man-at-Arms upgrades really fast if you are using the Burgrave Palace. Plus, you can also get your Blacksmith upgrades very easily here using the Minework Palace. And that combination could put you into a spot where you do have a good standing army, like numbering 20 with good Blacksmith upgrades in the next 1 or 2 minutes.
I wonder what the thought process is for Mista not starting marching drills now. Obviously, like you can see by his gold that he needed all the gold he had to get the 2 researchers coming out, the upgrade for the man-at-arms as well as the mace. But marching drills is going to take a while to research. And I think that's a big deal here because like that gap close potential on your spearmen, on your knights, it's going to increase your aggressive timing. Without it, you're going to be slightly delayed, especially if you start to rely heavily on man-at-arms, which as we can see is the intent here. So the difference there, like in movement speed, especially like the timing now, you do want marching drills when you approach this base because when you start diving without it, how are you going to assault these villages? You can never keep up with them.
Yeah, I agree with you on this one, to be honest. I think he was concerned about the knights showing up at his base and he wanted maces first because when you get maces, your men-at-arms turn much more effective against the knights than they are by default. So he probably saw the knights and said, okay, I might need to fight here in the next 1 or 2 minutes, or probably even 30 seconds. So I prefer to just get a combat-focused upgrade, like which actually increases my survival chance as compared to just being able to move a little faster towards the enemy. You'll be outrun by the cavalry anyways, but if you take a direct engagement against those knights, you prefer the maces over marching drills.
Absolutely. And right now, it looks like Leenock has no intention of going just yet. Just guarding, making sure that Mista isn't going to bum rush him. The problem is this bum rush, like, it doesn't have to be straight away, does it? We've seen this so many times at the moment, Lidakor. You just keep building and building. And the crazy part is with the initial gold reserves, which, by the way, we didn't even highlight that they're unraidable in this game. And the food you have from all the sheep, you can actually bulk up to 30+ man-at-arms before even worrying about running out of resources. And you can see that gold. That's what I'm talking about. Look at that right there. How the hell do you ever raid that as a French player?
And you see Mr. Garrett 42 stone, and one thing that Core pointed out to us here as he was observing at the beginning of the game is that there's a discount on the tower emplacements for the HRE, so they only cost 37 stone to make an arrow slit emplacement, which means that if Mr. Getter is 40-ish stone, then he's gonna be able to drop it if he needs it, and you could see that he preemptively did that. Now, looks like he's going to have some issues accessing food here, because he's moving out towards the berries, running out of sheep, but he's also running out of his base with the men-at-arms, and look at that. This is the power of the Burgrave Palace. 21 men-at-arms, with +1 attack and +1 range defense, potentially even marching drills. That's a scary army for Leenock to fight against.
Absolutely. I mean, they call them the Burger Palace for a good reason. You know, it's very meaty. As you can see, you can get a very meaty front line with this choice as opposed to Radiant's Cathedral. And still no marching drills, though. He's just going to march straight towards the base. The problem is he's moving at 1.12 movement speed, and those villagers are up at 1.29 with wheelbarrows. So it's going to be very hard to stick on top of them. Of course, if you get close enough, you will begin to charge. But I don't see you ever getting close enough. Like, Leenock's going to be able to peel back in time because he's always guarding against you and chasing after you with his cavalry.
I would love to see Mista adding 1 or 2 spearmen to this group just so that he has that brace potential, because you see what Leenock is doing. He doesn't want to take prolonged engagements, he just wants to charge in, disengage, because the men-at-arms can't brace, unlike the spearmen. And there is marching drills coming in here for Mista. He's marching straight in here towards that gold mine, and it looks like Leenock is going to take the engagement against the men-at-arms. Those men-at-arms, those are Castle-Age men-at-arms with maces. They do really well against the knights, surprisingly well.
Yeah, they just turn them into a giant meat pie right now. It's like they're just getting clowned down. Like, you're talking 12 damage plus the extra 6. Like, it's comparative damage at half the price if you think about it. Like, the knights, after they strike their initial shot, it's 24, 25 damage. And although that's still an advantage over these man-at-arms, when you talk about a cost efficiency perspective, it doesn't add up. And it's why the man-at-arms are just going to rinse and repeat on this. They're not going to be phased away. They already are doubling up, and now they're shutting down Leenock's eco. This is going to be problematic. He's not going to run out of food because he's on the fishing line for the moment, but so far he has absolutely zero answers to this quantity of man-at-arms.
And the problem is that he's stuck in Feudal Age, which could be a common problem for the French over here. He's not even on 2 TCs, and oh, Mista's heading out to the relic. I wonder if he's going for a fisherman. He could try converting the fisherman over here, because that relic is being brought to the front line rather than being brought back. Looks like he just got confused here for a brief moment, so looks like that prelate is actually going back here. For a moment, I got scared. But yeah, as you pointed out, those men-at-arms, they perform really well over here. Now they have good upgrades. They do have the maces. They do have the movement speed. They also have the first range defense, which makes them even better when it comes to surviving against the town center fire. And as you said, you're just going to shut down Leenock's eco and prevent him from adding new army.
Villagers trying to run back. Few of them are going to be going down. And the problem right now is, like, Leenock, he's running out of go fast. He can't keep up with the demand. He can't rely on archers either. Like, this double archery range is completely worthless for him. I'm surprised he even went for it. And no! The villagers,
oh, he shows
they're about
it.
to snitch. They're leading it out. And that's an auto aggro right there from Mista that's going to gather him a lot of important information.
And look at this. Leenock can't afford to leave his base now with the knights, so Mista can move out for a shorefish. Oh no. There it is.
Here he comes.
You gotta do
Grandpa's
it. You gotta do it,
staring at a
Mista.
tree.
Let's go!
Oh, Leenock,
Oh!
no! It's too late, it's too late! Half of them are going to go to formation shuffle,
No!
it's going to be tight! Oh, Leenock! Can we just discuss how ridiculously BS formation shuffle is, actually? That looked like he should never have got away, and all of a sudden, like, turn 90 degrees and go at the speed of light. Oh my good God, that just saved his bacon.
Oh man, I mean, yeah, that was big out there. By the way, Mista is down to 29 villagers, actually, as compared to 43 over here, and his men-at-arms are getting cleaned up, so maybe we have spoken a little too soon, because looks like Mista ran out of juice here a tiny bit, and when the dust settles, we do have a pretty massive eco and army lead now for Leenock.
I don't think he was even being raided, though, right? Like, all the attention was in Leenock's base. I think he was just missing villager production at multiple points here. It's crazy to think, like, there's some weird things that have been going on with Mista this weekend so far. We talked about, like, even when he was looking dominant, some small things like just not getting wheelbarrow 30 minutes into a game was, like, a big puzzling
Or 40
detail.
minutes into a game. He doesn't have it.
I mean,
he doesn't have it.
You're probably counting it. And you're right, in this game, he doesn't have it either. So you're now going on a fish, and that's where this really gets inefficient, because you already highlighted that, you know, like, we have to equate the walk between time. And of course, you only gather up a small amount of food running back. It's not if you, like, when you're on deer and you got 25 or 30 with wheelbarrow, you only go up to 14 total when you've got wheelbarrow, and Mista doesn't even have that. So he's not even getting the full efficiency of fish.
And essentially fishing is the source of food where you spend most of your time walking, because you don't carry a ton of fish and you gather it very fast. You also deplete that deposit really fast, so you have to walk to more distant ones. So having wheelbarrow, if you gather with like 10 villagers from shorefish, actually gives you like a 7 to 8% boost in your resource income. That is essentially a measured statistic as compared to, just looking at the pure numbers built into the game.
Oh.
Ooh.
Wait, he's going again. He's going again.
Ooh, there's a wolf,
Now,
though.
yeah, oh, God. It's a good idea. And Mr. needs it. He's
Nope.
desperate for it right now. He's 15 villages behind. Where is he going?
Maybe he tried the conversion in the first place because he realized how behind he is, and when you're spamming infantry from the Burgrave, you could be easily constrained on food even with an HRE eco. Yoink, that's a dead monk.
You don't think it's not just a dead monk? That relic that he's been carrying the whole time, Lidakor, was the one from his base. So
Oh no.
if he wants to if he wants to go back and pick them up for like gold trickle, he doesn't have an easy grab straight away now. And Mista only has one product remaining. I don't even know if you can sacrifice additional villager production. Maybe you have to at this stage. I think you kind of have to all in. Right now,
this
the
is
man at arms
difficult.
chasing in. It's tough. Like, he gambled. He went for an all-in play. And this is why I appreciate Mista. This is what I love about him. Like, not many players are willing to do this kind of thing because it's very hit and miss. Like, if it doesn't work or if you don't find the right area of the base, you probably are just waving the white flag. But I love the relentlessness. The fact that he's like, okay, I still have over 20 man at arms. I'm not out yet. It does look grim, but I can still hunt.
Yeah, I agree with you on this one, and as you pointed out, it was about shutting down the eco of Leenock, but now the eco of Mista is essentially shut down as he runs out of shorefish, and the thing is that the moment you relieve the pressure on the food eco or the gold eco of Leenock, Leenock can use those knights that are freed up by that to start raiding you, because the only reason why Mista hasn't lost villagers on the shorefish as of yet is because those knights are busy defending. But if Mista runs out of juice here, he runs out of aggression, suddenly those knights will turn their attention towards the fishing eco of Mista here.
And that's the remarkable part, actually, is that Mista has kept all that attention in Leenock's base. It's not common you see this from a French player. Usually they'll peel off 1 or 2 knights to go hunting. And speaking of going hunting, in all the wrong places and getting all the wrong things, this little prelate came looking to hunt villages and instead is being hunted by wolves. And right now, a clash in Leenock's base, up to 17 knights, getting their bonus damage out. And Mista, he might lose half the man at arms, if not more from this.
Yeah, it's actually surprising that we're not seeing a single spearman out here. Sure thing, there are some archer ranges from Leenock, but Leenock, his only unit on the battlefield is just knights. So if you mix in a couple of spearmen over here, you could help your case. And while you were talking about that, I was looking at Mista's villager counter. He was at 30 villagers for the last, 1 minute or so. He is not making villagers. He's constrained on food. He's spending all the food he gets on men-at-arms. And now it's getting concerning because we're looking at an 18 villagers lead. And the only way, or the only scenario under which you can justify not making villagers, given that we are in an early game scenario like this, the only scenario under which you can justify it is if you can kill the enemy villagers faster than what is essentially your rate of losing villagers by not making them.
That's right, folks. You heard it here. Welcome to another episode of Bronze Barbarian. Wait, no, that's not right. It feels like it, doesn't it, Lidakor? I don't know if you've cast too many low elo games, but this is the kind of the number thresholds I've seen people stop at the lower rank. But Mista is not your low ranker here. This is a top 10 contender in a lot of people's eyes, and it's for good reason. Like, he is all in. He's still trying to push the man at arms, but admittedly, to bring to your point around spears, like if he did push spears instead, that's a 40 resource differential. He would have actually been able to afford spears in the same quantity as man at arms and still got villages. The reason he hasn't done it, I think, is because he keeps diving the TC, and that's where the spearmen are less effective.
And you can see that now we're down to 18 villagers here for Mista. He's losing also a lot more with those knights coming in. With the man-at-arms no longer pressuring Leenock's eco, he can free up the knights, and Leenock is just going to wipe out Mista here. Mista is down to 16 villagers. Like, he can no longer just produce units because he simply has no functional eco. 16 villagers, out of which 15 are idle. That's not what I call a good eco.
I mean, if he wasn't going to build more eco, it's like, I've still got over 20 man at arms. So he's like, Lidakor, chill, I've still got over 20 man at arms. Is he actually going for a landmark snipe now? He's actually going for a landmark snipe. I love that Mista refuses to give up in the face of doom. How many players in this situation would have went, yeah, that's GG. I give up. Not Mista. He's like, no, there's like a 1% chance. If Leenock forgets he has knights and doesn't come back to defend this, I can still win.
You gotta play it out. It's a best of 3. You lose this game, you are going to be down to a match point for your opponent, and he is pulling the villagers. He wants that landmark snipe, but the town center is still full HP, and it looks like he's gonna tap out. The men-at-arms probably get wiped out by the knights. Indeed, that's the case. It's too little too late. Interestingly, if he actually went for a much more aggressive focus on the landmarks at the beginning or that intermediate stage of the game, I think he would have had a better chance of landmark sniping his opponent here. But Leenock was just allowed to build up his knight numbers. I think after the initial engagement, Leenock didn't lose a single knight. And when you're playing with those knights, the key thing is that you don't have great production. It takes so much time to build them. So you can't afford to lose them. Mista had way better production, but he simply couldn't kill the army of Leenock. And you can see this is actually the villager count graph over here. Look at that. Mista, reaching Castle Age, stopped making villagers entirely. I thought he added villagers every once in a while, but that wasn't even the case. He just stopped making villagers, and that is deliberate. It's not a mistake from him. Or, well, we can debate if it's a mistake, but this was intentional. It's not like he just didn't notice he's not making villagers. As you said, he was going all in. He wanted to turn all the food he gets into men-at-arms, but that's risky. Every 20 seconds that you don't kill a villager, you actually lose one compared to the opponent.
Jawohl, das ist gut for Leenock to open up this series with a win by getting rid of, funnily enough, the German in this situation, the HRE. And Mista, it's the type of strategy we don't see many people engage with. There's an interesting point you brought up around maybe just going for landmarks straight away. I don't think even the landmarks. I think you go for the any like military buildings, right? Anything that can push knights. Like the School of Cavalry is one of the landmarks, of course, that can do that. But if you see a stables, if you see anything else that's exposed, just torch it down. Because another issue is when you don't have marching drills quick enough, like your timing gets set back. It doesn't sound like much when you look at marching drills, the percent it gives you, and you look at the difference it makes on a man at arms, but it affects their charge speed as well. Like it actually is a big increase that allows you to gap close. And that was just what was missing from Mister. He never really could get in quick enough. And the funny part is when he goes to that villager pool at the end, you like, maybe if he'd done this before they all died to the knights, I could see it possibly working with like a 1% chance, but it's too little too late. And it's too easy for Leenock to clean up. And the problem is like Mr. knew that he was on the clock at that point. That's why he didn't go back, folks, to reinvest because we saw the number increasing and he knows it's increasing on the knights. He knows that number's going to keep going up. And even though you've rushed castle, because you haven't got scalability anymore, you're basically playing a prolonged feudal against French.